What's up, y'all? I read a book and then I watched the movie. Let's talk about it. I'm going to be completely real with you here. This is mostly a celebration on the fact that I read a book. It has been, you know how long it's been since I've read a cover to cover book in my hands book. Kindle Unlimited doesn't count. At least 2 years. Fall 2021 was the last time I read a whole book. I read One of Us is Lying, and I read it so that I could watch the short-lived little television series, season 1 of the series of the same name on Peacock. I ordered this book off of Amazon over 2 years ago with the intention of reading it at that time, but I'm pretty sure I was just having one of those moments where I was just sad, and like a lot of women, I buy a lot of books when I'm sad. So, but it's all good because I saw they were turning this into a movie. I saw it was going to be on HBO Max. I said, you know what? Let me find the book somewhere in my room and read the dang thing. And I did it. Took me longer than I anticipated. Life is busy. But I finished it the other day and finally finished the movie. What an experience. So, based on the novel by John Green, this is Turtles All the Way Down, directed by Hannah Marks, stars Isabella Merced. It's about a young woman named Aza who is suffering with obsessive compulsive disorder. The book is about her dealing with this mental illness, but it's kind of centered around this mystery billionaire who just became a fugitive. He left behind 2 sons. He was about to get arrested for fraud and decided to go out on the run and left behind his 2 boys, Davis and Noah. And Aza and her best friend Daisy decide they want to get in on the mystery to get a $100,000 reward. And part of them getting information requires Aza to reconnect with Davis, whom she met at a camp for kids who lost a parent. Aza lost her father, Davis lost his mother, and now Davis doesn't have much of anybody. They reconnect, they become friends. All the while, she's dealing with this thing in her head that's forcing her to do things that she doesn't want to do. And that's kind of what our story is about. Now, in the movie, this mystery surrounding, the billionaire Pickett takes a bit of a back seat. It's kind of it's background noise in a way. It's kind of part of the setting. It kind of gives us a wraparound picture of where we are and kind of what's going on in people's lives, but it doesn't play as prominent of a role in the story as it does in the book. And I kind of like that. At first I thought I was going to be bothered by the fact that it wasn't, but I love what they chose to focus on instead. This is the thing with adaptations. Now, once upon a time, they could do whatever they want with adaptations. Audiences weren't so unforgiving. You could kind of just take a book and just find inspiration within the story and create a movie. Now, audiences are expecting movies to be, word for word, scene for scene. And I think with adaptations, you run the risk of the movie being very episodic because filmmakers and screenwriters will be so focused on bringing certain scenes to life that they'll forget and neglect the story. But I think what this movie does very well, and John Green gives a great blueprint, he always does, is he manages to give us these big moments that we can latch onto, and then these little in-betweens that we, the reader, are very familiar with, but this movie audience who may not have read the book, they're not familiar with, but really, they don't need it. How do I make that make sense? Here's the thing about John Green, though. John Green, he writes teen fiction, young adult fiction, whatever you want to call it. So he wrote, Looking for Alaska, Paper Towns, The Fault in Our Stars. All of these have been adapted in some way. Looking for Alaska was adapted into a television series, which was on Hulu. I didn't watch that, but I did see the movies Paper Towns and The Fault in Our Stars. Now, if you're familiar with John Green in any way, if there's a book that you have read by John Green, you read The Fault in Our Stars. The most heartbreaking and devastating book, and that book in particular is about kids with cancer. This movie is dealing with mental illness. Now, from what I've learned about John Green is that he dealt with OCD as a kid. So this was very cathartic for him. But what I like about John Green is two things. Is number one, his the way he writes adolescence, it's almost a caricature. Is that he takes these very real things and he exaggerates them. He makes them very, very big and almost unrealistic, especially in the way they might dress or talk or even in their names. He exaggerates them to an extreme, and yet he manages to make these extremes so relatable and so accessible, so that we have these very large, heavy topics that become palatable. It makes it very easy for us to talk about OCD and mental illness when we have a almost exaggerated and yet very understated character like Aza, or an extreme person like her best friend Daisy, or when you go back to The Fault in Our Stars and you look at the character played by Ansel Elgort, August. Very exaggerated, very unlike anyone you would ever meet in real life, and yet he's very relatable and very accessible. So John Green, I feel like, tends to take the extreme when it comes to creating his characters and even creating the worlds in which his characters live, which I think for some people can be too much. But I think if you're a young adult, a teenager reading his books and you're diving into these heavy topics, it really is a good thing. Augustus Waters, not August. Please forgive me. Doing movies about mental illness, they can go one of two ways. I think if you're talking about mental illness, you can go in terms of, maybe a thriller of some kind or a crime drama where we're talking about mental illness, but there's some criminal activity involved. Or you can get to where it's very cliche and watered down in that it's not realistic or relatable. And I think with OCD, because it's such a very, willy-nilly thing for people to say. This is one of those things people say, oh yeah, that's messing with my OCD, when they see something out of order or if they see things in a row and something's crooked and they're like, oh, that's messing with my OCD. I think it can be very dangerous when we take these very real health terms and we make them so casual that we forget that these are very real diseases and illnesses and disorders that people are dealing with. And OCD can be very crippling. I think when you have something like OCD where it's very much in someone's head, there is a challenge. How do you take something that's internal? How do you make it external? How do you make it visual? And in the book, we get to kind of read her thoughts. We get to kind of see the processes and actions and in motion. And then you gotta find a way to take that process in motion that we see in the book and make it visual. And I think they do a very good job. We get some very quick cuts. Her obsession seems to be with bacteria and, possibly getting, C. diff or some sort of bacterial infection, and that she has this cut on her finger that she's constantly picking at. It's calloused over, and she's constantly cleaning it and making sure it's not getting infected and making sure that the blood looks a certain way. And if she gets too close to people or she kisses a boy and she's suddenly thinking about microbiomes and bacteria going back and forth, and this thing she has with hand sanitizer. We get to see these things kind of visually happen. We get to see the way she kind of checks out and checks back in, the way she's off to the side and people are trying to talk to her. So we're not just seeing how this disease, this illness, this disorder affects her, but we're also seeing how it affects other people. And this is the challenge with mental illness. Those of us who suffer with ailments, illnesses, and disorders where we feel like we have this voice in our head that's so much louder than reason. One of the things that's so hard to talk about is how it affects the people around us. It's so hard to talk about it because it feels like such a heavy burden. And we kind of get to see from her best friend's perspective the weight that it carries. And I think if you're someone who struggles with mental illness, seeing the way Daisy reacts and responds to her can make you a little mad. But I think it also helps you to feel a little compassion because Daisy is just such a likable character. Speaking of, exaggerated caricature, John Green, she's such a likable and lovable character. She's adorable. She's funny. She's such a mood. And she's such a good friend, but she's such a real person. And you get mad at her a little bit because how dare she, but also like, what an incredible human being. Not everybody is strong enough to love someone like that. And that's a weird thing to say, but I think it takes a lot of strength to step outside of yourself and just love someone unconditionally, even when that person feels like they're just so unlovable. There is a moment. So Aza is reconnecting with Davis and they go on a date where he takes her to Chicago because she talks about how she wants to go to Northwestern, but she doesn't feel like she'll ever be able to go to Northwestern. So he decides to take her there to see a professor where they get to sit in on this professor's class, somebody whom she greatly admires. And what a sweet little romantic gesture. But she gets an opportunity to talk with this professor where she just opens up and she says things that she hasn't said to anyone else. And I cried while I was making my breakfast. She is surrounded by people who love her. She has her mom, she has her best friend, she has his new boy Davis, who is so considerate and so passionate and so patient. And yet she bears her biggest fear to a complete stranger. And there was something about it that was just so relatable that it got me, and I cried. And I couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle it. Just felt very raw and just honest. And that's John Green there for you. You know, you have a lot of authors out there who are writing these fun, cool stories, and that's great and all, but then you have John Green out here just saving people's lives so casually. But John Green is also really good for doing that, where it's not these big moments that'll make you cry. It's not, you know, these predictable elements or tropes within a plot, but it's these mundane, ordinary moments, seemingly insignificant, that'll just hit you where nothing has ever hit you, that will speak to you in a way that nothing has ever spoken to you before, that will hit at a wound that you won't let heal. John Green has a way of doing that in his novels, and like, round of applause to Miss Hannah Marks for capturing that in film. I don't know if it was clear or not, but I loved this movie. Isabella Merced, bless her heart, I'm so happy for her. Because, you know, again, bless her heart. She was in Madam Web earlier this year, and, you know, I said what I had to say about that movie. I don't feel like I need to say it again, but I think I remember saying it, at least about Sydney Sweeney, how it's just so unfortunate because it feels like she's on such a high. She's doing so very well, and then this wrench of a movie was just kind of thrown into her path. And then I see Isabella Merced here, and I'm feeling kind of the same way. This is a young lady. She's on the come up. Like, she's an incredible young actress. She has such a bright future ahead of her. What a difficult subject matter to tackle. What a difficult character to step into. And she did it. She did such an incredible job. I can't wait to see what she has next, which is actually Aliens, Romulus, in August? So, and then she's also going to be filming Superman. Oddly enough, she just finished a Marvel movie, not MCU, but Marvel. And now she's going to be in a DC film. You know, you go, girl. You do that. That's it. That's all I got to say about that. Again, this was mostly a celebration. The fact that I read a book. I did it. I'm so proud. Once upon a time, I used to read a book a week, 3 books a week. But times have changed. I've gotten busy, and I've forgotten how much I love to just sit and just go other places, you know, from the comfort of my own room. So that was Turtles All the Way Down, directed by Hannah Marks, based on the novel by John Green. The movie is on Max, HBO Max, whatever you want to call it. And I loved it. Solid 8, maybe even a 9 out of 10. Highly recommend. So if you've seen it already, if you're going to watch it, let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you next time.